Welcome to Teaching Orchestra. In this episode, I'm going to be going over the common problems in Sahara Crossing by Richard Meyer. These are the spots that often go overlooked that I didn't already cover in the previous 4 videos. The first problem that I want to address is the pizzicato. We all know that pizzicato likes to rush, but typically when I hear this at a contest, most orchestras handle the motor rhythms just fine in the beginning, and where it breaks down is actually measure 26. 26 is going to take both patience and skill. When I do this, I have my students start and measure 25 and play to 26 into 27. And I have the whole class count and play at the same time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you're having your students count and play, look at the mouths of your students and look for the students who aren't counting. If it's 1 or 2, those are the students who are going to be playing in the rest at the concert. I don't know if I would call them out for it or isolate them. I guess it depends on the student and what sort of relationship you have with them. There might be a reason for it. They might have some sort of a modification you don't know about. And what I would do is partner them up and use their stand partners and have the inside players try to count and play at the same time and have the outside players watch them and hold them accountable. Then flip it around and have the inside players do it. Emphasize the counting portion because that's the most important action. You can give them the option to count without playing, but make sure that they count. You can't give them the option to play without counting. Another trick to help them learn faster is using a memory device. What you can do is subtract 1 or more notes and add rests. So for low strings, you can take out the note on beat 4, 1, 2, play, rest, and see if they can just line that note up. Or you can take out the note on beat 3 and have them play on beat 4 and see if they can count 1, 2, 3, play. Because of the way this is written with the rest, it's likely your low string players, they're going to end up goofing this up. So that's why I like to modify the end for the cellos and bass players. But for your violins and violas, you can add a rest on beat 1, 2 just to make sure they're paying attention and just make it a little tricky and make sure their brains are working. I like this method. Like if you've studied memory systems, you've probably come across the method of removing letters from your vocabulary list, and it probably helps you memorize vocabulary terms faster. And the idea behind this is that your brain has to work to fill in the missing letters, and that's why you learn the list faster. That extra stimulus helps your brain to work more efficiently and faster. And to get the same effect here, you can add rest to create the same effect for your students. You can take out notes, and then their brains have to work harder, gives them an extra stimulus so that you get the biological adaptation. Plus, it's like a game too, and we can gamify this and try not to play the missing note, right? It's not as fun as Call of Duty 21, right? Respawning forever. But it might be fun enough to learn the rhythm. The next common problem is at measure 43, and we addressed this a little bit in my phrasing video, but a lot of times the low string statement of the B theme is pretty underwhelming. Make sure that your low strings are playing in a reasonable bowing lane. If they're playing over the fingerboard, it's going to sound weak. This spot here at 46 is notoriously out of tune. The cellos have difficulty getting from the B flat in 45 to the D in 46. And the bass players have a bit of trouble going from the B flat to the C sharp on the A string. In both cases, the D and the C sharp can be flat, and this is going to be noticeable because the basses are playing an open D here, so you're going to hear it here. And you could also hear it here against the cello's C sharps. If you apply some of the concepts from my video about backwards extensions, it should really help. If they move their thumb towards the pegs to play the B flat, this should help. But there's another problem with this for the cellists. It's on the A string, and oftentimes cellists do some quirky things with the left hand on the A string, and the fingers start to flatten. So take the concepts from the extension videos and make sure that their fingers are round so that they can transfer the weight to the fourth finger when they play the D. You want it to be in the right spot, but you want them to get good leverage so that they have enough finger pressure. Most orchestras play consistent intonation-wise throughout Sahara Crossing, but this one spot in measure 46, we get there and we're like, what happened, you know? As a TMAA judge, that spot kind of haunts me, all right? There are two more spots that I want to take a look at too. Measure 52, we get this third theme, which is 3 two-measure phrases. And then it transitions here back to the A theme through the del segno. Here in 62, we get a left-hand pizzicato, and that's pretty fun, right? The issue is that the material in this section is unique, and you need to run it quite a bit in the middle part of your rehearsal sequence. So maybe like 3 to 4 weeks from your performance, you need to start hitting the spot first before you play anything else, and go over it a few times, practicing the transition. Don't always start pieces from the beginning and run to the end. And I encourage you to use nonlinear thinking as an orchestra teacher. This spot isn't terribly difficult, but you want to do the dynamics and the phrasing, and you want to do the bowings and all that stuff when I went over in my phrasing video. But you need to get your students to a higher comfort level with this part. And so it would make sense that in some rehearsals, maybe 3 to 4 weeks out from your performance, you start there and you really work that spot up before you do anything else, just to make sure that it gets some priority. The final spot that I want to go over is the end. And I recommend that a week out from your performance that you start with the coda. And if you run from the coda all the way through, it's about 14 seconds long. You can run it 10 times in a row. That's about 2 minutes of rehearsal time, right? It's a great investment and you want to pay it forward. So do it first in the rehearsal about a week before your concert. Just run it 10 times in a row. It takes up 2 minutes of class time. So what happens if you start at the beginning and you say, oh yeah, we'll get to the end later? Well, then the bell rings and you're still at the B theme, right? And the coda has some unique challenges as well. It has these sustains in the upper strings, and we've got these ties here, right? And we've got some counting that we have to do in this last part, and you want to get them really comfortable with the counting, with the pizzicato here. This is another great spot where you can have them count and play, count to 4 in every measure, and make sure that their notes are lining up with their mouths. Again, you want to emphasize the counting over the playing, right? Just like we did in measure 26. Watch your students' mouths, watch for who's not able to do it, and make sure that they get the attention that they need so that they can. It's an important skill. And you know what? It's good practice for you too, because you can practice cues. Violin 2, violin 1, low strings, right? Starting from measure 67, you can cue in violin 2 viola, cue in your first violins, cue in your low strings. It's a great spot to practice your conducting, practice your cueing. So it's 1, 2, prep, cue, prep, cue, prep, cue. Make sure that when you're cueing your players that you look at them. If you go 1, 2, prep, cue, prep, cue, prep, cue, it just doesn't work as well, okay? You don't have to do it this way, but I recommend that you find something that works. And I'm not a huge fan of like choreographing your conducting, but in tricky spots, you might want to have more of a solidified plan. You might want them to be familiar with what you're doing. And if you're worried that you're getting too predictable and they're not watching you, well, if they start coming in wrong and they're rushing, maybe, you know, it could be a problem. So maybe you could do something different, like slow it down and see if they're watching, or maybe you could stop, just randomly and see if they're able to follow. Maybe you just want to throw them a curve and see if they can do it. Now, often when I try those techniques, I tell them in advance. I don't tell them what I'm going to do. I just say, hey, I'm going to try something different here in the coda, and I'm going to see if you can tell what I'm doing differently there. And that way they understand and they're not just getting blindsided by it. And maybe some of them will be able to figure out what you're doing. Another issue that we have here is this release in 68, and it's kind of picky, but are they all releasing on beat 2, or are they just kind of releasing whenever in this like 9-beat thing? And you can cue the release too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1 off on 2 to make sure that everybody's out at the same time. Okay. And you can also try to trick them there too, like 1, 2, 3, and then just stop and see, oops, if they go on or if they're stopping with you or how much attention they're paying to you. And you can use that trick at any point in the coda. You can just stop them at random and see if they're following you. Again, anytime you're cueing or releasing, I recommend that you watch your musicians and not the score. All right, the score's not that complicated. You can look at your players and see who comes in, because you want to know that information too. You don't want to know that somebody messed it up. You want to know specifically where the problem is, not to call them out or make anybody feel bad, but just to know in your head so that you know who to help. And I'm going to make the final point here. Can you ever remember a time when you were in rehearsal and a conductor called you out in front of the group? All right, how did that make you feel? Probably not very good, right? Maybe you deserved it and maybe not, but either way, it probably didn't feel good. So we don't watch our players just to call them out and make them feel bad. We do it just to get the data, right? To know who to help, and we can try to target some of our teaching into those directions, generally. And some people are going to overcome this feeling and they're going to, dig deep and improve. But if you put people on the spot, other people will shut down, and it sort of depends on also your relationship with that student and with that whoever's on the podium, right? If you just smile at them and you're like, hey, yeah, you'll get it next time, and then they might smile back, and then they will get it the next time. But if you start yelling at them, it might be a completely different story. So just think about how you want to handle those situations where individuals are making mistakes and you're trying to help them. So those of us that have been in abusive rehearsal situations, like musical abuse, where someone who's usually insecure about what they're doing on the podium uses their power to make a statement about their authority on those of us who are playing in the group. And those of us that have been in these situations, we have to be careful because we tend to repeat the cycle of abuse, right? We tend to do what we see. So just be careful with this stuff, especially if you've been in that situation as a player. We want them to watch, and we don't want them to play in the rest, but at the end of the day, we want them to love and enjoy the music they're making and that process so that they continue playing their whole lives, all right? So that's my last tangent of the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you think this content could help another orchestra teacher, please feel free to share it with others, and we can help grow this channel. So I appreciate the support of those who buy my teaching companions on teachingorchestra.com. It helps me upgrade my filming gear and my lights and all that stuff, and I've invested in these things. But remember, if your school district won't pay for the products on my website, just send me an email at teachingorchestra@gmail.com, and I'll always send them to you for free. And I thank you for your support, and I want to support you and your students too. So thank you for watching, and thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next episode.